I will now call back to order the regular meeting of the Lake Forest School District 67 Board of Education for December 18th, 2018. May I have a roll call, please, Eileen?
Mrs. Levert?
Here.
Mr. Folker?
Here.
Mrs. Sands?
Here.
Mr. Borkowski?
Here.
Dr. Lemke?
Here.
Mr. Ford?
Here.
Mr. Novitt?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. Good evening and thanks for coming. Last week I had the opportunity to speak to the District 67 staff at their holiday party. Tonight I'd like to share with you a condensed version of my comments to them. Good afternoon. On behalf of the Board of Education, I want to wish all of you, the District 67 staff, all of you a safe and fun holiday season, and also say thank you. Over the past few years, I've had a special view of the District 67 staff, a view that was a combination of being a board member and a parent. I've been on the board almost 6 years, and my two kids, John and Katie, have been students in the district the entire time. I found the parent perspective to be extremely valuable because it has allowed me to get to know many of you, the staff, on a personal level, and it has let me see in greater detail what it takes for our district vision to be implemented. We talk about this at board meetings regularly, but I see with greater clarity the hard work of implementing the vision when I'm in the building meeting with you, discussing things at a student level. I've witnessed firsthand, both as a board member and as a parent of two kids with IEPs, the complete transformation of how education is delivered. I've seen inclusion rates rise dramatically over the past 5 years, with co-taught classrooms being introduced, reducing the use of traditional pull-out model. I've heard from many of you what it means to co-teach class. It takes hard work to do successfully, and you put forth that effort, and it shows. I've been at curriculum nights when you've explained to parents what the flipped classroom means. I've heard the question be asked, so you personally make a video for every lesson for the kids to watch? That must be over 100 videos you make. And you humbly answer yes. That is exactly the awesome work that you do for our students. I've sat with teachers who are literally creating brand new classes with new curriculum in order to deliver instruction to students who have non-traditional learning styles. This project involved ignoring almost every traditional assumption a teacher has about teaching, starting with classes being held in a classroom and worksheets being used. How can it be possible to create a math class that doesn't meet in a classroom and doesn't use worksheets? But you smile and you do it exceptionally well, and our students benefit. Pretty amazing work that you all do. These are real examples. They're specific examples, but they're representative of the work that all of you do for all of our students. At board meetings, we regularly discuss how the district's vision is to meet every student where he or she is and to really provide individualized education. And that is exactly what you are doing. You are providing individualized and differentiated teaching to our 1,600 students every day. How does that transformation happen? There are a few things that go into it. It starts with great vision and leadership, and we're fortunate to have an outstanding administrative team led by our superintendent and the central office staff, as well as our principals and building administrators. The transformation also requires money, and hopefully you have all seen that this board is committed to providing the financial resources to make it happen. We've spent money on professional development, on additional staff and coaches, on upgrading our facilities, and you will continue to see us spending money to support your efforts. Next week, which is tonight, the board will be reviewing plans for new science labs that many of you had a hand in designing. But even with vision, leadership, and money, something else is needed to accomplish a major transformation. It takes an incredibly awesome team to implement it. And that is what you are, an incredibly awesome team who are living and breathing our vision, working incredibly hard to implement that vision every day. Our vision revolves around the central theme that every single student matters, and I see you working crazy hard and crazy smart to make that vision a reality. I speak for the entire District 67 board when I tell you how proud and grateful we are to have each and every one of you on our team. Thank you very much. So as we enter the holiday season, I hope that each of us takes a minute to consider all the blessings that we have. I know that I am grateful for many things this year, including working with 6 fantastic board members, a great superintendent, and a truly outstanding staff. That concludes the President's report. We now move to the Superintendent's report.
Thank you, Mr. Borkowski. I have 2 announcements to pass on.
The first Deer Path varsity and JV Lego robotics teams competed in a regional qualifier. Both teams were incredibly successful, and the varsity team received a first place award and also won second place overall. The varsity team will be competing in the state championship this coming January. On a different note, Alexandra Makowecki, Shalini Krishnaswamy, Alex Anderson, Taylor Ross, and Aaliyah Attar were all accepted into the American Choral Directors Association National Choir. Over 3,000 students auditioned, and these 5 singers will be representing our school and community at the ACDA National Conference in Kansas City, Missouri in February and March. And the culmination, this will culminate with a performance in front of 2,000 choir directors. So different kids and very different activities doing very, very well. I wanted to bring you up to speed finally on a conference that a number of our staff participated in. 3 of them are here with us tonight. So Susan Milsk and Jeff McHugh and Kate Kavanaugh, and I think that is it. And I went, and one other person, or 3 other folks from 115 went as well. I wanted to bring you up to speed on what Tash is all about. The purpose of the Tash conference is to advocate for the inclusion of students with significant learning differences. They've been in existence since around the time that the IDEA was first implemented. Mentioned we had a number of folks from our district, from District 67 go, and there are reasons, important reasons, to send a team of people. One of those is that one of the primary ways that I've found that you achieve organizational change is, instead of sending individuals, the larger the group you send, the greater the impact. And a couple of the things that are most important is people really have a great deal more engagement and then ability to apply the learning when they get to talk to their peers. So principal to principal, teacher to teacher, whatever it might be. And so they get to see and hear from people. At this conference is very unusual because they actually have students that present. It's probably the only conference that I've ever seen a student present. Likewise, parents. There are researchers there, so you get to sit with the researchers themselves. And the dialogue with their peers is incredibly important. The final night of the conference, went out to a collective dinner, and the energy from that night was really amazing. And then part of the conversation went straight to, okay, so who should we send next year, and what's that look like? But one of the things that surprised me the most, we had a number of folks that joined the large contingent from this area. Winnetka was a co-presenter with us at one of the sessions, is how much our folks appreciated having the Winnetka staff there to talk to, just to see things in a completely different way. Another thing that we learned in that process was that Winnetka had used us as a model. They came a couple years ago and visited Cherokee. Jeff McHugh arranged for them to see what what our inclusion practices were looking like at that point in time. We've continued to evolve those, and without realizing it, we had served as a springboard for them in this work. So the biggest takeaways, overwhelmingly, I think every single person said this was a fantastic conference, and a number of them said, I've been in the business for 20-some years. This is the best conference I have ever been to. All the discussion was not about whether this is a good idea. All the conversation was, okay, so who else do we need to send, and what does that team look like for next year? So obviously, music to my ears in that point. Important quotes. One of the researchers shared with us, look, there is absolutely no evidence that inclusion harms anyone. Doesn't matter who the student is, it only helps everyone. And that is academically, but also very importantly, socially and emotionally. And Winnetka shared the story of one of their students. They had a great deal of trepidation about having this student join them in their general ed classes. And they said one of the most amazing things was the parent of the child talking about, my kid is invited to birthday parties, and I never imagined that that would be ever possible. It requires a wholesale reconsideration of all of your resources. So think about all of the money you spend on anybody and everybody in the district, and that's what you put into the pot to figure out how to make all of this work. There is no study anywhere that shows that separate is better. I give Kurt Schneider at NSSCD a great deal of credit because what he's working toward is actually to diminish the programs, the number of students that are in attendance at NSSCD, and send them back to their home districts and provide support within their home districts. It has a positive impact on all students, irrespective of whether they are high, medium, or low achievers. And one of the most important things is you have to eliminate places where kids are relegated to. So the default setting that, look, we want the student to be in our building, in their home district, with their peers, in their general ed classroom, and have the support come into them. So there's really no other option. Those are among the most critical factors in preventing the spread of students being sent to separate facilities. So it was a very impactful conference, and I really appreciate the opportunity to go. There's no question that we will continue this work. Another one of the most encouraging things is also there's no question that we are viewed as leaders in the region for pushing this work forward. We're going to have a number of North Shore districts that will also join us next year at this conference, and that, again, was also really welcome news. So with that, that completes the superintendent's report.
Thanks, Mike. Questions or comments for our superintendent? I have one for you, Mike. So, great conference, nice summary, fantastic takeaways, and it certainly aligned with your vision and our vision of where we're going. So I think our community and our staff sort of know some of that based on our vision, but it's, in my mind, doubly powerful to hear from experts and outsiders that inclusion is the right track. How do we get that message that it's not Mike Simic, it's not the board, but national educators, we're doing the right thing? How do you get that down through all of your staff as well as to the community?
So there are two different parts to that. With the staff, one of the things that will be a next step for us is that the learnings that took place from the meeting, we've got an all admin meeting, which is all administrators from both districts will meet in this room, and the folks that went to the conference will be leading the session on, okay, these are the things that we learned, and use artifacts from the conference so you have so it's not sitting and telling people about how great it was, but they're actually reading the materials from the conference and then reflecting on them and considering what are the next steps for us. There are other things. I know that in this coming, it's either January or February, there is a film that was previewed at the Tash conference that will be shown. There are two places on the North Shore that's going to be shown, followed by a conversation. We will be one of the places that NSSCD superintendent will be showing that, and that will then extend out beyond us.
Great, thanks. Other comments, questions for Mike? Okay, thank you. We now move on to our first public participation. If any member of the public wishes to address the board, please approach the podium and state your name and address before addressing the board. We ask that public comment be limited to 3 minutes. Any members of the public who would like to address the board? Seeing none, we now move on to reports. Our first report is the assessment report, I believe led by Susan.
Is that mic turned off? Blue? What did you press? Thank you. Thank you. I, for some reason, thought all the slides were together. So, good evening. This is our 18-19 academic assessment report that reviews our 17-18 data, just to make that clear. And the assessment report really looks at two different areas, both growth and proficiency. Before coming here, this report also goes to the Education Committee, and that committee, those committee members, Mr. Volker, Mrs. Sands, Ms. Levert, get an opportunity to see it and provide some feedback for us to take back. So it will be, I will talk very short and leave you open for some questions, but I wanted to highlight three big areas to take away. The first area is really around the growth that District 67 students experience. And District 67 students continue to demonstrate that they grow at a higher rate than national and state peers. Additionally to looking at how we grow nationally, we also look at how we grow locally, and that is how our local growth model is built, is in order to be able to look in kind of both sandboxes, how are our students growing. And we did also experience areas where students demonstrated higher than expected growth locally as well, which bodes even better since we keep an eye on both. Secondly, we always are looking at our PARCC scores for a proficiency level. We do look at that, and we look at that both compared to state peers as well as our local peer districts, those 18 peer districts listed in the report. And for this year, we have shown our upward trend has caught up with our peer districts. And I note that particularly because one of the things that we look for is growth over time on any measure, and our curriculum definitely impacts how our students grow. And our math curriculum started implementation with Bridges in 2013-14, and it's important to remember that that growth takes time. And now that we are 5 years into that, we are seeing that gap close. So when we look at the counterpart in English language arts, we want to know and always remember that our writing and our reading curriculum and alignment came a little bit later, and we are still watching that to make sure that it goes up. Thirdly, then also looking at the PARCC data, it does provide actionable measures for us at the subclaim level. It's important to remember when we look at the proficiency levels on PARCC, and this is listed out in the report for you, but the state draws those proficiency lines. And when you look at proficiency and percentile in our state ranking, you will find in two different places you see our meet or exceeds at 79.8% of our students meeting or exceeding, and that's the 99th percentile in the state. So you can look at that a couple different ways, but one important piece to think about when we look at that is when we're comparing ourselves against our peer districts, those peer districts are vying for that tippy top of the percentile when you're talking about 81% or 80%, and we're talking about tenths of points often. That is the differential for us among that peer group. So we do really, at the teacher level, we look at those subclaims so that we can really dig in and see, is it major content, is it supporting content in math? How is our literature versus our informational reading working? What does the written expression look like? So we ask those questions to see how our curricular alignment is working and try to better analyze what we're doing in our classrooms. Those are my three big to give you, and then knowing that you read the report, feel free to ask any questions.
Thank you, Susan. Questions or comments regarding the assessment report?
I'll ask one to begin that links to the last comment you made about the 99th percentile. So have you spoken with anybody in the region that has provided, or at the state, that is able to provide some kind of reason or rationale why we are in the 99th percentile of the state, which Illinois has many of the best public schools in the entire nation, and yet the state tells us that 79% of our students are meeting or exceeding their expectations? Is there any plausible explanation that you've heard? I have not.
I have also not heard a plausible explanation. It's the line that is drawn for us to work from.
And so I'll draw a connection between that and the recent conversation we had about the Every Student Succeeds Act, that there are arbitrary lines that are drawn, and these results, whether it be from the federal level or from the state level, there's a group of people that sit in a room and they say, this is where the line is. Why? Because we're saying this is where the line is. And there is no research basis for, I would say, most, if not all, of these decisions, and this is evidence of that.
Thank you. Which is one of the reasons why we do focus a lot on growth and growth and growth, to make sure that that is where we're hanging our hat, while we keep an eye on the proficiency.
Other comments for Susan?
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Susan, based on this year's assessment report, what would you suggest are the things that, as a district, we should take the greatest pride in, the numbers reflecting, and what are the things that we need to be looking at for more improvement going forward?
Sure. I will say that we should continue to take pride in how we grow our students, that we continue to do that better and better, and that encompasses, to some extent, how we are raising the level on proficiency as well. But overall, that would be the biggest thing that I would say we should have pride in. In terms of what we continue to do moving forward, is we continue to do a lot of what we are doing, because it is showing that it's moving the needle. And as our teachers get better and better at their craft, which is what the instructional practice is that we've asked of our teachers in the past few years, is not an easy ask. And they are continuing to make adjustments and strides. So I think we are doing the right things, and we will continue to do those things, keeping an eye on how that alignment works and shows up.
So relative to the park scores, you said math, Bridges has been in place now for 4 years. 5 years. And each year we've shown continued improvement relative to our peer districts and how we perform relative to how they've performed. ELA, we've seen the new curriculum in place. Reading has been 2 years, and writing is 3.
Yes.
So that has, as you point out in your notes, has shown more variation. It's gone up and down. Is there a time frame that we should be expecting to see more consistent improvement? Like, should we say, hey, look, it's going to take at least 4 years before we're comfortable that it's what the numbers are reflecting is a good way of looking at whether the curriculum is meeting our needs in terms of pushing us forward?
Sure. For general implementation, you often do see dips and some fluctuation. 5 years is a good marker. 5 to 7 years is a very strong marker. While we did see a bit of a dip in ELA last year, we are still, if you followed a line, on an upward trend. So I think that we can't, with 2 years of reading and 3 years of writing, we do need a little bit more time to solidify that.
Anyone else? Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
We now move to the strategic plan update. Rebecca and Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Workowski, and Kate Kavanaugh is going to be featured on this year's, or this installment of our strategic plan update, and bring us up to speed on some Foundations and Champs work. So, Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry,
Yeah,
Kate.
good evening. No, that's all right. So I'm going to be sharing the first strategic plan update for this school year, and specifically highlighting some of the work we've been doing with foundations and CHAMPS over the past 3.5 years. But the rest of our administrative team is here, so if you have other questions about other areas of the strategic plan, we're happy to answer those too. Before I start, I want to start with a few statements for us all to think about. So when a child doesn't know how to read, we teach. And when a child doesn't know how to add, we teach. And when they don't know how to tie their shoes, we teach. And when they don't know how to behave, we, hopefully, all of our answer is we teach. But before we began the work of foundations, I think the answer to that really varied from building to building, from staff member to staff member. Sometimes they thought it was more of that instructional approach, but sometimes it was more of punishment or send them out to another program, another school. So there were pockets of greatness going on in the buildings with behavioral supports, but it was really dependent on administrative leadership and some of the staff members in those buildings, and there was not a systematic approach across buildings in the district. So in the spring of 2015, the district joined a cohort of schools through NSSCD to go through a 3-year training sequence of foundations. And foundations is really a process of guiding schools through the construction and the implementation of a multi-tiered system of behavioral supports. You may have heard of MTSS, and we've done a lot of work on the academic side with reading and math, and this is really focusing on the behavioral side and building those structures in the buildings. What is nice is it takes a proactive instructional approach to managing behavior, teaching expectations, really with the goal to reduce the barriers for learning and reduce those behavioral and motivational issues. The emphasis in the past 3 years has really been on this Tier 1. So it's been on a universal level and really looking at preventative ways to support students across the building. Some of the work that's been done, if you're out in the buildings, we'll see this, the evidence of the foundations. The schools have completed looking at like their class or their school-wide expectations and breaking that down into common areas. So what does that look like in the bathroom, in the hallway, in the cafeteria? They've put procedures in place for teaching those expectations at the beginning of the school year, upon return from break, or at other times of the year if needed. They've developed supervision plans for different common areas, such as out on the playground and the lunchroom, to make sure all those environments are safe places for our students and that everyone has a common way of managing behaviors in those settings. The buildings have worked on developing levels of behaviors so that there are common staff responses. There's a common language that's used for acknowledging positive behaviors, but also managing and correcting misbehavior, and this really ensures that all staff are taking ownership for all students in the building. Part of foundations and the work that we've been doing in the last 1.5 years or so has really focused on, when you look at like this classroom level, and that's the work that we've been doing with CHAMPS that you'll see in the strategic plan. The research really shows you can avoid most behaviors if you explicitly define and you teach those expectations across the day, across all activities and transitions. And that's really what CHAMPS is about. It's about a set of decisions that a teacher should make to help structure their classroom for success for their students. And I think that's really what teachers have grasped onto with the training, those who have attended, is that it's not a program. It's not a one-size-fits-all. Things don't have to look the same across classrooms, but it's really about best practices around classroom management. And there are some non-negotiables. Expectations need to be posted. There needs to be a high level of positive interactions with students, and student behavior then matches those expectations. So this has become a district initiative. We started with a training last year with groups of teachers from the buildings, and then continuing on this year and into the next year with the goal of, by the end of next school year, all staff trained in CHAMPS and implementing it. So some of our next steps, continuing that work around CHAMPS and the training of all staff. We've been working on the development of an administrator walkthrough tool, with really the goal that this is going to be able to support our ongoing work with CHAMPS and with foundations, and looking at ways that we need to continue to provide professional learning opportunities. So right now we're working with administrators on getting that in place, bringing it with the building, back to the building leadership teams and getting feedback and then rolling that out. We've also been working on training on early stage interventions. So when we go back here, you can see we've been working on the CHAMPS piece, but now now giving tools to all classroom teachers so that when there are some chronic misbehaviors going on in the classroom, they have tools to support there before asking, referring for additional services and interventions and supports for students. And then our next place will really be working on that development of Tier 2 and Tier 3 systems of support. So for students who are not responding to those universal levels of supports in the classroom and at the school-wide level, then needing additional, more intensive interventions and supports. And so we'll be working on that in the coming months with our teams. Any questions?
So, Kate, one of the lessons from Tash was that the methods that work for students with significant learning differences are the same methods and strategies that work for students that are exceptional on the off the charts on academic achievement. With this, I'm assuming that there's a great deal of similarity there, that every student becomes dysregulated at some point and needs to be able to talk themselves, self-talk or whatever. Could you give an example of how this winds up living itself out in a student's life, whether that be a student that struggles or a student that typically does not and just happens to have benefited from it?
Well, one of the parts of CHAMPS is really looking at the structure in the classroom and within the environment with foundations looking at across the building. But when we look at the structure within the classroom, one of the things we talk about is how you arrange your classroom for the students. And do you build a place that is like a place like a peace place, we call it. And so I showed some examples, which actually when I had gone to the Teachers College on the units of study and adapting that for students with learning difficulties, they talked about that, like having a place in the classroom where you teach students the skills of self-regulation, that they have a place that they can go to take a break and then come back to whatever the task is that they need. And one of our teachers in one of the buildings, a first grade teacher, has actually put that in place, and she found that not only were students who had more difficulties with self-regulation using that, but really the entire class was using that, and at the first grade level, learning those self-regulation skills that are so important moving forward.
So I think you said something to us at the Education Committee that struck me, and in what you just explained about the work that you're doing in the classrooms, you touched on it, but I think it's an example that helps bring to light for people what you really mean. I think you talked about positive interactions with students, and you had mentioned a ratio, like what the ideal ratio is. Could you talk a little bit about that with the whole board so they can hear? Because I think that example illustrates very tangibly for people what you mean when you say shifting how you're interacting with students.
So within the CHAMPS framework, probably the single most important strategy is having a high ratio of positive to negative interactions with students. And the research shows that for most students, having at least 3 positives to every 1 negative is sufficient and will meet their needs. But for students who are at risk, that needing to have at least 5 positive to every 1 negative, and then for students who have significant behavioral challenges, that it's 9 to 1. So when we think about those students who really do challenge us every day, really needing to find those opportunities to give them that positive interaction. Because for those students, they don't care if it is negative or positive. A lot of them are really just starving for attention. And so that's one of the most important strategies, even just across the building, that we talk about with staff, of really looking at those ratio of interactions, and that's just an easy thing that can tip the scale for students and something to focus on.
Other questions or comments? Thank you, Kate.
Yeah,
Fantastic
thank you.
work. Keep it up. We now move to board committees. We'll start off with Board Education Committee. Jeff.
The Education Committee met on Wednesday, December 12th here in the West Campus. We were joined by Susan Milsk, Rebecca Jenkins, Jeff McHugh, and Mike Simic. Our primary agenda item for this particular meeting was review of the 2018-19 assessment report, which we heard this evening. Susan presented the report to the committee. We reviewed it in detail and provided feedback and input, and it was nice to see that that feedback was indeed incorporated into the final report that was presented this evening and is in the board packets. So I won't go into any great detail as to the specifics because it's very well represented. The other item that we discussed is back at our October meeting, committee members requested an opportunity to visit a school or schools to observe co-teaching, to get a better understanding of what co-teaching is, how it works, and what it looks like in the classroom. So as a result, Susan's going to be working with the schools, as well as the committee members to set up dates in early 2019 to allow us to go out and get into a classroom or classrooms and gain a better understanding of how co-teaching works in the buildings, which I think is a great example of how the committee members are truly engaged and adding value relative to their roles on this particular committee. I'm very proud of the people that we have on the committee and the desire that they have to stay connected. So thank you, Suzanne, thank you, Alice, and thank you to the other committee members. That's it. Our next meeting is scheduled for Friday, January 11th, here at the West Campus. That's it.
Questions for the Ed Committee? For Jeff? Okay, thank you, Jeff, and the Ed Committee. Board Finance and Ops, led by Tom.
Finance and Ops did not meet in December. We are getting close to scheduling a meeting with our auditors for January. I'm not sure if we've decided on the date, but I will let you know when we do.
Thank you, Tom. Questions or comments for the Finance and Operations Committee? Seeing none, we move on to policy. Kent?
Unfortunately, we have nothing to report because there was no meeting, but hopefully in the next few months we'll have something to report.
There will be one coming up in January.
The boss says there'll be one in January, Kent. Questions or comments for the Policy Committee? Compensation Committee, Rob?
Compensation has not met.
Nor has the Joint Shared Services Committee. We move to the liaison reports, NSSED. I believe Alice is giving the report this month?
Thank you. I went to the meeting on behalf of Suzanne Sands. The North Shore Special Education, or better known as NSSED Board, met on December 12th. The Leadership Council recognized Tim Semish, a first grader at Indian Trail School, which is part of District 112, that evening. And they showed a collaborative effort of Tim, his family, District 112, and NSSED, allowing Tim, a first grader, to be very successful every day at school. NSSED is also looking for a new Chief School Business Officer, and the position has been posted. Dr. Schneider is providing professional development for the Leadership Council each month of this school year. Topic shared was the history of diverse learners in the American public school system and how it has expanded and improved over the years. A report on the Tash Conference. The annual Tash Conference was a big success, bringing together the best of the best to look for solutions, not barriers, reinforcing the belief that the best way to serve students with disabilities is providing the most inclusive environment and advocating for them. Superintendent Mike Simic and District 67 board member and NSSED president Suzanne Sands attended that conference. Enrollment update provided. Total enrollment in NSSED is 365.7 students, 10.6 students less than was budgeted. Current information indicates there are a number of students who will enter the early childhood and the North Shore Academy programs that will add to current enrollment. The current deficit should be eliminated by the end of the school year. IEDA grant update. There are changes to the IDEA funding process. Starting with the fiscal year 2020, IDEA funds will flow directly to member districts rather than to NSSED. The member districts will in turn forward NSSED's portion of the grant allocation. NSSED will continue to help member districts with their grant submissions and provide training in the spring. Assessment schedule. NSSED administrator assessments for students in their programs will take place mainly in the spring. There will not be a park assessment. It has been replaced with the Illinois Assessment of Readiness. A schedule of all assessments is available through their website, and results are reported to home districts. Office support professional development is being provided to all office support staff to support the goals of their strategic plan. It will take place over 18 months, and it will help the support staff develop personal learning goals, create written procedures, and cross-training for critical tasks. Finally, the Policy Committee update will be presented for adoption. The manual will be presented for adoption in January 2019 at the next Leadership Council meeting, which, by the way, is on January 9th, 2019 at 7 p.m.
Thank you, Alice. Questions or comments regarding NSSED? Seeing none, we move on. Thank you. Legislative Liaison, Tom.
No report.
Thank you, Tom. Spirit of 67 Foundation, Suzanne.
The Spirit of 67 Foundation held their holiday brunch on Tuesday, December 11th, and there were a few minor updates that were shared at that event. Family participation district-wide is just over 62%, which is a record for all time. The Sheridan and Cherokee communities have reached a participation rate of 80% or greater at this point, and as such, have earned a $1,000 Founders Grant to use any way they like in their buildings. Everett is approaching the goal at 70%, and DPM is making their way at 62% as well. The grant season is coming, and grant applications are due January 31st. You can visit the Spirit website for more information about that, and their next meeting will be Tuesday, their next board meeting will be Tuesday, February 12th at 9 a.m. in West Campus.
Thanks, Suzanne. Questions regarding the Spirit of 67 or comments? Executive APT, Jeff.
The Executive APT Board did not meet in December. The next meeting will be on Wednesday, January 9th, here at the West Campus. While I have the microphone, I want to say two things that I was remiss in saying during the Education Committee report. One, as Mike asked, I want to make sure other board members understand that if they would also like to come out and see co-teaching in process, you're welcome to participate. We'll just work with Susan to get that set up. And then secondly, Susan does tremendous work in putting this assessment report together every year. It's a lot of hard work, it's a lot of time, and she does a fantastic job. So I want to recognize Susan for taking the time to do it. Well done.
Thank you. Questions or comments regarding APT?
And in case it's not clear, we are not going in as a group into these classrooms. We actually talked about that, and we said that that would be horrifying. So the schedule will be for individual people to go and see different things, and then we'll come together at a meeting to debrief.
Thank you for that clarification. Anything else? Any other liaison reports that I may have missed? We now come to our second public participation point in the meeting. If there's any members of the public who would like to address the board, please go to the podium. Seeing none, we move to our action items. First up is the adoption of the 2018 tax levy. May I have a motion to approve the 2018 tax levy?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Comment or discussion? I'll say a comment to start us off. Just for the public to know, there are times that this board takes very important votes, and we may just simply vote on it, and there may or may not be a lot of comments, and the public may wonder, do we even know what we're voting on or care? The answer is yes, and in the case of the tax levy, we consider this one of our really most important things that we vote on. It affects every taxpayer in the city of Lake Forest. So we had a special meeting I think it was last week or in the last 2 weeks, which was a workshop open to the public, where every board member and the administration talked about the tax levy. The real driving questions were, why do we need this money? Why do we need an increase in the taxes? And a brief summary was, in order to achieve the ambitious vision that we have, we continue to need more money. Additionally, earlier this year, we took about $10 million of debt, and the projections, the 5-year projections that we used when we were voting on that included this tax levy. So in order to continue on the excellent financial path that we're in, we need this tax levy to do what we said we were going to do, basically. So I certainly opened up to any other board member to make comments, but I just want the public to know that we did discuss this at length in a workshop. Other comments or questions? Seeing none, roll call vote, please.
Mr. Novitt?
Aye.
Dr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Mrs. LeVert?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Next up, may I have a motion to adopt the resolution authorizing a supplemental property tax levy to pay the principal of and interest on outstanding limited bonds to the school district?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Comment or discussion? Jen, could you give maybe a 30-second overview for the public of what this means?
Sure. This extra resolution allows the district to capture the consumer price index, the increase in CPI associated with the debt service extension base the board approved in 2016. As part of that debt borrow, we had assumed we would capture the CPI increase. According to bond counsel, we need a separate resolution in order to do so. So we would need to do that in conjunction with our annual levy, which you just approved at your last action.
Thank you. Other questions or comments regarding this item?
So just to clarify, this is not an additional tax. This is merely a formality for the bond council to say that we are going after the CPI, which by Illinois law, that's the most we can ask for.
Correct, and this is specifically associated with that roughly 450,000, I don't know the exact, 488,000, I think, in this budget year, debt service extension-based piece that you approved in 2016.
Any others? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Dr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mrs. Lavert?
Aye.
Mr. Novit?
Aye.
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve Amendment 1 to the voluntary 403B plan?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Questions or comments? Jen, maybe I'll ask you to do a similar quick overview.
Sure. This is part of the plan that we adopted in 2008 when the IRS made new rules and regulations. We, at that point, simply put into place a pretty straightforward 403B and a 457 plan. We've had some interest from employees of late looking for a Roth 403B option, which our plan currently does not allow for. It's at no cost to the district. It's a benefit for employees. So that's why we're making a recommendation to add that amendment so that employees could contribute on a post-tax basis to a Roth 403B to our plan.
So just to repeat a couple of key items I think you just said. This is no cost to the district and an employee benefit.
Yes.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Mrs. Lavert?
Aye.
Mr. Novit?
Aye.
Dr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. May I have a motion to approve the human resources items as presented?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Comment or discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mrs. Lavert?
Aye.
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Dr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Mr. Novit?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We now move to the consent agenda. Any item may be removed from the consent agenda at the request of a board member. I will now read the items on the consent agenda. Approval of disbursement, payroll, and financial statements, November 2018. Acknowledgement of Maxwell donation of a piano. Minutes of a regular meeting and workshop, November 13th, 2018. Minutes of an executive session, November 13, 2018. Minutes of an executive session, October 29th, 2018. Minutes of a board workshop, December 10th, 2018. Disposal of audio recordings, April 17th, April 24th, and April 27th, 2017. Would any board member like to have any item removed from the consent agenda?
Please remove the second one and read it in full.
Thank you. We're going to remove the acknowledgement of the Maxwell donation of a piano, and we'll come back to that momentarily. Any other items from the consent agenda that would like to be removed? May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda just read with the exception of the piano donation?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, I guess comment or discussion on the consent agenda? Roll call vote, please.
Mrs. Lavert?
Aye.
Dr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Novit?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Thank you. We now move to a motion for the acknowledgement of Maxwell donation of a piano. May I have a motion to approve that?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
Comments or discussion?
I believe you should read it out loud, Mike.
Thank you. I was going to ask if someone, actually don't have it very handy. Is someone?
Read it.
Suzanne?
Dear Mr. and Mrs. Maxwell, thank you for the recent donation of a Young Chang grand piano. Deer Path Middle School will certainly benefit from this donation. Deer Path Middle School is a public school. No services or remuneration were exchanged for this donation. This letter serves as an indication that your donation on December 12th, 2018. The school district makes no indication as to the fair market value of the donated items. This donation may be tax deductible under law. Please consult with a tax advisor. Thank you for your support of the Deer Path Middle School music program in Lake Forest. Sincerely, Benjamin Gray.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Roll call vote, please, on the acknowledgement of Maxwell donation of a piano.
Dr. Lemke?
Aye.
Mr. Borkowski?
Aye.
Mr. Novit?
Aye.
Mrs. Lavert?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mrs. Sands?
Aye.
Mr. Folker?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. We now move to FOIA requests. We had one FOIA request in the last month. ProPublica, Illinois, and Chicago Tribune commercial status complete. Announcements. This Friday, December 21st, 2018, winter break begins at the close of the school day. School reopens on Monday, January 7th, 2019. Monday, January 21st, 2019, there's no school, Martin Luther King Day. Followed by the next day, Tuesday, January 22nd, 2019, we are back here for our next Board of Education meeting at 7 p.m. May I have a motion to adjourn the Lake Forest School District 67 Board meeting?
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting adjourned.